The bow is a fairly unique class in that it is one of the few ranged weapons available in Monster Hunter Wilds, and it is going to give you a fairly simple but effective tool that you can utilize to damage enemies from afar. Most weapons in Monster Hunter are going to be melee, which means you're going to have to get in and personal with monsters, whereas the bow is going to allow you to take things out from range, which is going to make things in some ways easier, in some ways harder. It is also going to be a fairly simple to master weapons because there aren't that many combos, there's not that much going on. It is a fairly easy weapon to just pick up and go. So if you want something simple, you want something effective, you want something that has, it's got its uses. It's also very good if you want to play online with co-op because you can kind of sit back. If you have someone that's playing melee, they can kind of take the hits on the front where you can kind of stay back and do some support damage from afar. Now, the bow is going to basically be involving making use of different types of shots. Now, the first basic shot is going to be just pressing R2 or right trigger, and this is going to do a simple shot. Now, you can pinpoint the accuracy of this a lot better if you hold L2, which will give you a crosshair, and then you can kind of direct where you want to make it go. It will shoot a little bit slower when you shoot with L2 since it is going to decrease the fire rate. If you hold R2 and longer, you will see a little red glow around your bow. That is when it's at full maximum charge. That will do the most damage possible. It takes a little bit longer to charge in all the way, but it will do a little bit more damage. So if you want to free fire and just press R2, kind of spam it, you can do so. But if you want to get more pinpoint accuracy, you're going to have to hold L2 or LT if you're on Xbox. You can also then do a quick shot by pressing circle, which is going to kind of do like a spread. It's almost going to be like a shotgun shot in a way. If you hold it with circle, you're going to do a similar attack, and that will have actually more shots. So this one's even more like a shotgun. I believe when you press R2 in circle, it's 3 shots. If you hold L2 in circle, it's going to do, I think, 5 shots. So it's going to have a bit more widespread, which means you have to be a bit close if you want to get all shots to actually hit. So if you get up close and personal, you can use that as an option. It's going to do a little bit more damage since you're going to have just, more projectiles reaching out. Another attack you can do is if you hold R2, you can potentially hold L2 as well, and then you can also end up pressing circle, which will then put a little circle on the ground, and this will then rain like a bunch of arrows from the above, and in the mix of arrows you'll see some will be glowing red, which means they will be kind of like these little bombs. They will be detonated when you shoot them with arrows. Now this attack, because it does shoot its own arrows as well as bombs in the air, if you follow this attack up with itself, it will be able to trigger these explosives. If you shoot them with arrows, essentially they'll blow up and they'll do damage to the monster. It's actually a great way of opening up wounds on monsters, because if you do end up triggering these bombs, it does end up doing a pretty big amount of like splash damage to monsters, which will very easily open up wounds. I really like this option for getting wounds set up, because obviously one of the big parts of weapons in Monster Hunter is trying to, get through those initial stages, get through the enemy's armor and start opening up wounds where you can get critical hits. This is going to be a great way of getting those wounds open up, because once you get those wounds open up, you can kind of do critical hits, you can down the monster, and then you can kind of do whatever you want to them for like 15-20 seconds, which gives you more time to open up more wounds, and from there it becomes a much easier game. So this is a great way of opening things up. If you do end up holding the circle for a short period of time, you will have a very small ring, and if you hold it for longer, the ring will grow bigger and bigger and bigger, which will just give you some more shots and more arrows. Now you're going to have to lead this attack up, because it is going to take some time for the arrows to come down. So either the monster's to be standing still, or you're going to have to try lead it ahead of where the monster's going to run. It can be a bit tricky to set up. You can also just spam it and eventually things will hit, but you need to be careful of that because it is going to take some time for those arrows to actually land. A nice way to trigger these arrows is going to be if you hold R2, you can then end up doing the 1,000 dragons. So you hold R2 and then triangle and circle at the same time, and this will give you a very big charge of a lot of arrows. It says it's 1,000 arrows. It's not actually 1,000 arrows. It's more like, I don't know, probably like 10 or so arrows. It's also got very short range, so you're going to have to do it up close. Again, it's not going to be able to be a shot that you can do at any range. Some of these shots are going to be a bit more long range than others, but the 1,000 dragons shot is going to require you to be very, very close. So if you want to trigger those shots from the arc shot, you're going to have to, well, one of the ways to do it, effective way to do it, is by using the 1,000 dragons, and that will be able to nice way to shoot. Or of course you can just spam some more arc shots, and that also goes ahead and does that. What else you can do is you can have some dodging abilities, so you can just press X and dodge and roll like normal. But if you want to kind of stay weapon at the ready, you can press X while you're holding in L2, and that will give you a little bit of a sidestep, and that is going to allow you to kind of stay in the action, stay with your weapon at the ready, and also dodge the enemy. What you can also do is you can combine this. After you do the sidestep, you can then press triangle, and that will allow you to kind of do like a jump and attack. This gives you a lot of mobility, and it keeps you kind of in the air, kind of makes it difficult for monsters to hit you, because if you're jumping around and shooting at the same time, it gives you a nice bit of defense as well as offense at the same time. What you can also, this is my personal favorite, the Dragon Piercer. This shot is going to give you insane damage, and this is kind of what I like to do as my go-to damage deal. If you press triangle and circle, you're going to do basically a big massive piercing shot, which is going to have a lot of range. I think this is the furthest range you can do in this. You can actually has a very decent range, far better than all the other shots. So you can kind of snipe enemies from far away, and it also does massive damage. I really like the shot. This is what I like to do as my go-to damage dealer. However, it is important to note that you are going to be locked into animation for quite an extended period of time, and as far as I'm aware, you can't cancel this animation. Once this animation gets going, you're kind of locked into it. Make sure that when you do this animation, you are safe. The monster's not going to attack you, because when you do, you're stuck in there. You can't dodge, you can't roll. Once you do this animation, that is it. So be careful. It's a very long animation. It takes like 4 or 5 seconds for it to go off, so you are potentially going to be having to wait until that's finished before you can attack again. Another thing you can also do with this is you can potentially use the R2 button plus square, which is going to put a tracer on the enemy. Now the tracer is going to be a very interesting mechanic, because wherever you shoot your arrows, or almost everywhere, I don't think it works like full 180 degrees, but if you miss the shot by quite a considerable amount, the shots will end up kind of being like heat-seeking missiles and go into that tracer. Now this works for pretty much any shot that I can think of. When you do this tracer shot, your arrows are all going to become, no matter what shot you use, they're going to become heat-seeking missiles essentially. So it gives you a lot of freedom to kind of shoot in whatever direction. You can kind of spam shots out without aiming. You can do whatever you want. So there's no reason to aim with this. You can just spam R2, for example, and still having to press L2 plus R2, because once you have a tracer down, there's literally no reason to aim. And that's going to give you an option where you can potentially, you know, just get 3 shots out without having to aim. Now the important thing though, this is one of the few UI elements of this weapon. If you can see at the bottom right hand corner, you're going to see a blue bar. Now those are your tracer shots. Those tracer shots aren't going to be infinite. You can only have 3 of them at first, and when you use them, it's obviously going to go, the bar's going to move down, and to replenish it, you just need to do damage. You have to attack the enemy, and that will end up refilling that bar. So if you do damage throughout the course of the battle, that will end up going up. I didn't find this tracer bar that important, because I found that, you know, it's very easy to aim, and if, you know, you have to have a pretty bad aim in order to kind of need this. It is useful sometimes when enemies are flying and enemies are smaller targets and they're very mobile, flying all over the place. That's when I found it was more useful, but especially with slow big enemies, the tracer rounds really aren't needed, but sometimes it can be nice for enemies that are flying or, you know, a bit smaller. But another thing you can also do is you can put a weapon coating on. So to put the weapon coating on, you're going to basically press triangle, and that is going to apply a coating. You'll see there's a few little bars in the center of the screen under the crosshairs. That shows you how many shots you're going to have available with that coating, and that coating is going to give you a bit of extra damage. You can also change the coating. To change the coating, what you can do is you can hold L1, and then you can choose different types of coating. So you can either unequip it, you can put in like a paralysis coating, and there are a couple of options you can do. You can go to shopkeepers, you can potentially buy them from them, different types of the things you need to create these coatings. But again, the coatings I don't find was that useful. It doesn't increase your damage by a significant portion, not enough to make me want to use this all the time. So it's just there as an option. You do have it, but nothing that you absolutely need to have available to you. Another thing you can also do with the bow is you can have a nice way of dealing with wounds. So if you do want to get critical hits on those wounds, what you can end up doing is you can end up holding L2, and very similar to a lot of weapons in Monster Hunter Wilds, you can hold then R1 or press R1, but preferably hold R1, and it will give you the big circle cross in the middle. And this will basically be like kind of like a thing you got to charge. If you hold it in long enough, you will start marking all the critical zones or all the wounds, and if you release, you will do a massive pinpoint damage, which will then break the wounds, and it will obviously knock off maybe armor pieces or give you some potentially extra resources from the boss, and it'll also do a lot of damage, sometimes knocking them down where you can further set up future wounds. So you definitely want to get these wounds set up as quickly as possible, and that's why I like using the arc shot early on, because the arc shot is going to be a great way of potentially getting you those wounds. Now overall, I must say the bow is a fairly easy weapon to use. Of all weapons I've used so far, I think it's one of the easiest. The trick comes in when it comes to your positioning, because obviously you are not going to be that effective at close range. You're not going to have any kind of melee options available to you, so you're going to have to try and keep your distance from enemies. You can get a little bit close. There are some close range options, but ideally you do want to be kind of staying back, because especially when it comes to things like the Dragon Piercer shot, which is going to give you a very big damage, but it's going to require a very slow charge up. You want to keep your distance, so when you do use that attack, the enemy is going to have a little bit of a hard time getting to you before you can get that shot off. So for that reason, you're going to want to stay away. You can also use the bow and arrow a lot more nimbly. You can, you know, you can kind of do the sidestepping and do the jump attack, which is going to keep you more agile. You're not going to do as much damage, but you are going to be a lot more mobile. Against some enemies like dragon types, or maybe something that's like, you know, a fast flying type enemy, it is going to be difficult to keep your distance. They can kind of swoop down and pick you off. So you're probably going to want to switch over to a more nimble approach and less, you know, heavy damage dealing things like Dragon Piercer. But if an enemy is especially big and slow, definitely focus on using Dragon Piercer. And if it's a fast enemy, you're going to want to be making use of sidestepping, jump shotting, and you're going to want to try and make use of lighter, quicker attacks to make sure you don't get caught off guard and knocked out. That is going to be the bow. I do think it is a great weapon for beginners, simply because it's very easy to utilize. And if you like range weapons, the bow is a great choice. And I definitely think think so far it's one of the easiest builds I've played. It's not too complicated, and I think it does offer enough complexity where you will be able to grow into it and you will be able to like master it over time. It's not very, very overly simple, but it will give you options to potentially grow into and master, like a lot of weapons in Monster Hunter. I think most weapons are going to be like this, but especially the bow is going to be very, once again, easy to learn, difficult to master. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to smash that like button and let me know in the comment section below, what weapon would you like to see me play next? Which weapon are you most interested in? And I'll look into making some more guides for them in the future. Take care, everyone, and bye-bye.